It begins so quietly you almost miss it. A faint tapping, like the fingertips of the sky brushing against your window. At first, it's just a whisper, a murmur so soft you wonder if you imagined it. But then another drop falls, and another, until the sound becomes steady, patient, and sure. Rain. You lean closer to the glass, feeling the faint coolness radiate through it. Outside, the world is veiled in a sheer curtain of silver threads. Every leaf wears a glistening bead of water. Every rooftop gleams as though polished. The air smells different, now fresh, earthy, carrying the scent of soil stirred awake. Rain has a way of slowing the world without asking permission. The streets quiet, the light dims, and somewhere deep inside you, your own thoughts soften too. Match its rhythm. It is not a rush. It is a reminder that life too can move gently. But behind this stillness, there is a journey unfolding, one that began far from here. Each raindrop tapping your window started its life high above in the vast open sky. The water you see falling now was once part of rivers, lakes, and oceans. Lifted by the warmth of the sun, it rose as vapor, invisible and weightless, drifting upward into cooler layers of the atmosphere. The process is called evaporation. Quiet escape where heat energy turns liquid into gas. You might think of it as water learning to fly. As the vapor rises, it meets the cooler air above, where molecules slow and gather together again. This gathering is condensation, forming clouds like soft, suspended gardens. Each droplet in a cloud is impossibly small, light enough to float, yet countless in number. Not all clouds will release their burden. But when enough droplets join, when they grow heavy enough to fall, they surrender to gravity's pull. That surrender is what you hear now, millions of tiny journeys ending, only to begin again in another form. Through your window, the rain draws delicate paths down the glass, merging into rivulets that snake toward the sill. You watch one droplet, join another, then another, until their combined weight pulls them down in a slow, glistening run. There is a quiet metaphor there that strength sometimes comes from joining forces, from not traveling alone. Outside, puddles form on the ground, their surfaces quivering as each new drop lands. You notice the way the ripples spread outward, in perfect circles, meeting, overlapping, and fading into calm again. Physics is at work here, though it feels more like art. The moment a droplet hits the surface, it pushes outward, transferring its energy in a widening ring. The sound of rain is not one sound, but thousands woven together. Each surface it touches leaves, soil, rooftops, water creates its own tone. Some drops strike hard and sharp, others fall into softness. Together, they become a kind of music that plays without conductor or audience. Except for you, your body responds in ways you may not notice. At first, the steady rhythm slows your heart rate, quiets your breathing. Scientists call this the autonomic relaxation response, a shift in your nervous system that leans toward rest instead of alertness. Rain, in its gentle persistence, tells your body it is safe to let go. And yet, for all its softness, rain is powerful. It shapes landscapes, feeds rivers, and nourishes the roots of forests. Every drop carries dissolved minerals, bits of the sky and earth passing between worlds. When rain soaks into soil, it begins another hidden journey seeping into aquifers, feeding underground streams that may not see daylight for centuries. You rest your forehead against the cool glass and imagine this cycle, endless and patient. Evaporation, condensation, precipitation, collection. The water falling now may once have been part of a glacier, a deep ocean current, or even another rainy night far from here. In every drop, there is memory. Your gaze drifts beyond the rain-speckled window to the hazy outlines of buildings and trees. Details soften, edges blur. The world becomes impressionist art colors melting into one another under the silver wash of rain. This softening has a science of its own, diffraction and scattering. The tiny droplets suspended in the air bend and scatter light, muting sharp contrasts and making everything feel closer, gentler. A car passes slowly on the wet street, tires hissing over pavement. Its headlights cut through the mist, casting twin beams that shimmer in the falling rain. Light, slowed by the density of water in the air, takes on a warmer glow. The physics of light interacting with water is complex, but in this moment, it feels simple. It feels like magic. Somewhere deep in your memory, rain carries associations. Perhaps it reminds you of being indoors as a child, tucked under blankets, listening to storms. Or of walking with someone you loved, sharing an umbrella, feeling the closeness of bodies moving through wet streets. Rain weaves itself into the fabric of your memories, attaching itself to feelings of safety, nostalgia, and even longing. The rain quickens for a moment, drumming more insistently on the roof. You imagine the journey of a single droplet from cloud to earth. Its fall is brief, mere seconds, but its history is long. The droplet existed long before you noticed it, and will continue long after it disappears into the soil. There is a humbling comfort in that, the idea that the world moves in cycles far larger than your own worries. Inside, you are warm. You can feel the temperature difference through the glass out's cool touch against the soft heat of the room. Heat, too, moves in cycles, always seeking balance. Physics calls it thermodynamic equilibrium, but here, it feels like harmony. Your breath fogs the window slightly, and you trace a line through the mist with your fingertip. Beyond that line, you catch a glimpse of something faint but distinct. Warm glow across the street. You narrow your eyes, focusing past the rain, and realize it is a display window, softly lit from within. Behind the glass, you can just make out the delicate towers and spires of something. Small, intricate, and golden. The rain seems to frame it, to pull your attention toward it. You watch as each droplet refracts the light from inside, scattering it into tiny halos. Whatever it is, it feels out of place in the grayness of the day, too magical, too carefully made. You stay there for a while, the rain's steady rhythm in your ears, the sight of that glowing miniature in your eyes. The rest of the world fades into the background. There is only this moment, the meeting of storm and stillness, of nature and craft out. You know you will have to see it up close. But for now, you let the rain keep speaking, each drop carrying the long, quiet story of how it came to be, and the even quieter invitation to follow where it leads. Outside, beyond the veil of silver rain, the glow remains warm and unwavering. You find yourself wondering what waits within that tiny world, and how its light feels up close. A question the rain seems to be urging you to answer. At first, it's only a blur of warm light behind the curtain of rain. You narrow your eyes, leaning closer to the window, following the subtle glow it seems to pulse faintly in the gray afternoon. The drops on the glass catch and bend that light, scattering it into tiny halos. Slowly, the image sharpens, and you begin to see its spires, arches, tiny towers rising in improbable detail. The world outside is wet and blurred, but inside that glass display, the miniature castle stands, untouched by the storm. Its golden light seems to defy the day's dimness, as if it carries its own sun within. You step closer, drawn by a pull you can't quite name. The air in the small museum lobby feels warmer, softer, touched by the scent of polished wood and aged fabric. Your shoes make a muted sound on the carpet, and with each step, the details grow clear, delicate turrets, winding staircases, rooms so small you could cup them in your hands. The fairy castle is a world condensed, and in that condensation, there is science. Your eyes travel over the delicate shapes, noticing how every line and curve, appears sharper than it would in a life-size structure. The human brain is wired for this delight. Psychologists call it miniaturization fascination. It's the way our minds light up when something familiar is reduced in scale. A castle you could walk through is impressive. A castle small enough to fit in a room, complete with chandeliers the size of thimbles, is enchanting. Why does scale hold such sway over our perception? Part of the answer lies in contextual contrast. Our brains carry mental models of how big things should be. When those expectations are defied, when something large is made impossibly small, it activates curiosity. You lean in, your focus sharpening, your imagination stretching to inhabit this altered perspective. You move closer still, noticing a set of miniature windows. Behind them, curtains no thicker than a strand of hair hang perfectly pleated. Here, detail becomes the language of wonder. The smaller the scale, the more your mind fills in the gaps. You imagine rooms that extend beyond what you can see, hallways hidden behind walls no wider than your palm. Light plays a crucial role here. The warm golden glow inside the fairy castle isn't accidental. It's crafted to create intimacy. In lighting design, this is known as color temperature. Warm light with more red and yellow wavelengths mimics the gentle hue of sunset or candlelight, triggering a sense of safety and comfort. In a miniature, this effect is amplified. The smaller the world, the closer the light feels, until it seems to wrap itself around you. Rain continues to patter softly against the museum windows, and for a moment, you imagine the castle existing in its own tiny weather system. You picture droplets the size of pearls landing on roofs no bigger than your fingertips. In reality, scaling down an environment changes more than appearance. It alters the physics of how things interact. A raindrop to a miniature world would be like a boulder of water falling from the sky. In model making, these differences are carefully considered, each detail adjusted so that the illusion remains. Seamless. You trace your gaze along the tiny cobblestone path winding toward the castle doors. The stones are individually set there, textures exaggerated just enough to be visible at this size. This speaks to another principle, perceptual scaling. When something is reduced, details must often be exaggerated for the eye to catch them. Real cobblestones might be smooth at a distance, but here, each one is sculpted with intention. You pause, considering how your perception is shifting. In this space, you are both an observer and a giant. Your body towers over the castle, yet your mind shrinks itself to fit its rooms. It's a form of imaginative empathy, entering another scale of existence. Neuroscientists believe this is tied to our brain's mirror neuron system, which activates when we imagine ourselves moving through a space, even if that space is fictional or impossibly small. The rain outside seems to recede, the sound becoming a muted background hum. Your attention narrows to the castle entirely, until it feels as though you've stepped into its story. You picture the lives that might unfold inside. Footsteps on spiral stairs, voices echoing in miniature halls, the glow of a fireplace, bigger than your hand. A sign beside the display explains that this is Colleen Moore's fairy castle, built over years by skilled artisans. You learn that each piece was crafted with precision, from the tiniest pieces of furniture to the delicate glassware no bigger than a fingernail. Craftsmanship at this scale demands not only skill, but patience. A slow, steady dedication measured in hours so small they can't be rushed. And here, science meets art again. The tools needed to create such miniatures borrow techniques from microfabrication, a field also used in electronics and medical devices. Steady hands, magnifying lenses, and specialized materials make the impossible possible. You lean closer to the largest tower, where a faint reflection of your own face appears in the glass. For a moment, you see yourself within the scene, your eyes following the winding stairs upward, your hands brushing along the tiny walls. It is a reminder of how scale can pull us inward, focusing our attention until the rest of the world falls away. The rain taps a little harder against the windows, pulling your awareness back to the present. But even here, in this small museum room, the fairy castle holds you. There is a quiet intimacy in seeing something so grand made small, like holding an entire dream in your hands. You think about the science of proportion and how humans have always built scaled models, not just for art, but for study. Architects use them to visualize cities. Engineers build them to test aerodynamics. And yet, beyond the practicality, there is always a touch of magic in seeing the world. Reduce. Your fingers rest lightly against the railing in front of the display. You stay there for a long time, your breath slowing, the glow of the castle seeping into you like warmth. In this tiny world, every detail matters. Every shadow is considered. Every piece has a place. Somewhere in the far corner of the display, a room catches your attention, a room lined with colors, shapes, and the faint shine of glass. You lean just a little closer, trying to make it out. The walls glimmer faintly, and you realize it's not just the light, but the materials themselves, stone, glass, perhaps even jewels worked into the design. There is more to see, much more. Your eyes linger on that glimmering wall, wondering what stories it holds, what histories are pressed into its stones and glass. And in the quiet space between raindrops, you feel the pull to step closer and listen. You move closer to the room that caught your attention, a space that seems to shimmer even in the soft light of the fairy castle. It's not just decoration. It's memory, suspended in materials shaped by both human hands and the forces of the earth itself. Your eyes adjust, and the details emerge. The walls are patterned with tiny stones, their surfaces polished smooth, yet still holding the faint grain of their origins. The windows, no bigger than a matchbox, are fitted with tiny panes of colored glass. Even from here, you can see how. The light changes as it passes through them, spilling colors onto the miniature floor. The stones and glass feel alive, not in the way a living creature breathes or moves, but in the way they carry time within them. Each piece began its existence long before it became part of this castle. Every grain of stone was once part of a mountain. Every particle of glass was once sand scattered across a shore or desert. You imagine that sand under the heat of the sun, each grain small enough to slip between fingers, yet ancient enough to have witnessed the turning of oceans and the rise of continents. Over millions of years, wind and water broke larger rocks into smaller and smaller pieces, creating the fine quartz grains that make up most sand. Quartz is durable, its crystalline structure resists weathering, allowing it to survive the long journey from mountain to shore. But to become glass, sand must undergo transformation. Humans discovered thousands of years ago that heating quartz sand to extraordinary temperatures, over 1,500 degrees Celsius, causes it to melt. The heat breaks the bonds holding the crystal structure together, and when the molten sand cools, quickly it hardens into something entirely new, glass. The glass in these miniature windows was shaped by artisans, but its essence comes from fire and change. You think about how fitting that is. Light now passes through something born of both destruction and creation. Color in glass is its own kind of alchemy. Tiny amounts of minerals alter the way light moves through it, shifting the wavelengths that reach your eyes. Add cobalt, and the glass becomes deep blue, reminiscent of twilight skies. Add iron, and it turns shades of green like forest canopies. Gold, in delicate traces, can produce a rich red, while manganese can create hues of purple. Each window here in the fairy castle holds more than beauty. It holds a record of its chemistry, a silent note in the song of its making. The stones, too, tell their stories. Some are smooth marble, formed when limestone is subjected to intense heat and pressure deep within the Earth's crust. In that transformation, tiny calcite crystals grow, interlocking into a surface that gleams when polished. Others might be granite, a mixture of quartz, feldspar, and mica minerals that cooled slowly from molten rock beneath the surface, allowing crystals to grow large enough to catch the light. Running your gaze over the walls, you notice how each stone's texture changes the way it reflects light. Some scatter it softly, diffusing brightness into a gentle glow. Others reflect it sharply, sending back a focused sparkle. This interaction is a dance between surface structure and optics, where the arrangement of atoms in each mineral determines how photons bounce away. You find yourself leaning closer to the glass display, trying to see the smallest imperfections, the tiny bubbles frozen in the glass, remnants of gases trapped during cooling. To a glassmaker, these might be considered flaws. But to you, they feel like fingerprints, evidence of a moment in time that could never be repeated exactly. Outside, the rain continues, its sound softened now by the thick museum walls. The light from the windows filters through the miniature glass, merging with the warm golden glow inside the castle. It is easy to forget you're looking at something so small. Your eyes and mind are drawn into the illusion of scale, until you feel as if you could walk through these halls, reaching out to touch the cool, polished stone beneath your fingertips. In a way, you already are. Your mind maps the space as if it were real, filling in textures, shadows, and echoes. This is part of how humans perceive environments. We rely not only on what we see, but on our ability to simulate experience in our imagination. You picture the sound of footsteps on stone, the way light might shift across the floor as the day moves outside. There's something grounding about stones and glass. They remind you of the deep patience of the earth. A mountain does not rush to form, nor does it crumble quickly. Sand takes centuries to travel from peak to shore. Glass, once shaped, can last for thousands of years if cared for, its surface only slowly wearing down. You trace the history backward. The stone in these walls may have formed when the first forests spread across the land, long before human eyes saw them. The sand that became glass may have been part of a riverbed before. It was swept into the sea. Each piece here has lived many lives, and now it lives one more as part of a castle small enough to rest beneath your gaze. The more you look, the more you realize that this room is a map of time. Every material here was once part of something larger. They were broken down, transformed, and reassembled into something new. The science of geology calls this the rock cycle, a continuous process of creation, destruction, and renewal. It is not unlike the cycles in our own lives, where endings lead to beginnings, and change is the only constant. You let your mind wander through this thought, tracing the arc of transformation. Fire turns sand into glass. Pressure turns limestone into marble. Light turns glass into color. And here, in this miniature room, all those transformations meet. Your eyes drift upward to the largest window. Through its colored panes, the warm light inside spills into the rain-gray world outside. The droplets on the museum glass catch that colored light, scattering tiny rainbows across the sill. The science behind this refraction and dispersion is precise, yet the effect feels like magic. White light contains all colors, and when it bends through glass or water at different speeds, it separates into its hidden spectrum. You're reminded that beauty often hides in the ordinary, waiting for the right angle to reveal itself. A thought comes to you quietly. These materials have no voice of their own, yet they tell stories through the way they hold and shape light. The artisans who built this castle gave them form, but the earth gave them character. In every wall, there is the memory of heat and time. In every window, the slow dance of light and chemistry. You stand there longer than you meant to, letting the quiet details pull you deeper. The rain outside falls in its steady rhythm. Inside, the stones and glass keep their silence. Yet somehow, they speak. And then you notice something else, a glint deeper within the castle, beyond this room. It's softer than the glow of the glass, warmer than the reflection of stone. A light that seems to move, flickering gently, as though it comes from something alive. You take a slow step toward that warm, flickering light, wondering what kind of glow could live inside a miniature world. Somewhere beyond the stones and glass, a softer radiance is waiting to be found. The flicker draws you closer. It is not the cold flash of a modern bulb, nor the stark glare of midday sun. It is something softer, rounder, as though each ray has been smoothed by kindness before reaching you. You step carefully, and the space opens into a room bathed in golden light. Overhead, a pair of miniature chandeliers hang from the ceiling. Their tiny crystal drops tremble slightly, scattering light in countless directions. Each droplet acts like a prism, breaking the warm glow into subtle shades: amber, honey, the faintest blush of rose. You feel the shift in your body almost immediately. Your shoulders lower. Your breath deepens. This is not an accident. Light has always been more than mere illumination. It is an influence, a quiet architect of emotion and physiology. Light begins its journey as a stream of photons, the smallest particles of electromagnetic energy. They travel at unimaginable speed, about 300,000 kilometers per second, until they meet something that bends, scatters, or absorbs them. In this room, the photons are shaped by the cut glass of the chandeliers, slowed and redirected in countless patterns before reaching your eyes. What you perceive as warm light is not about temperature in the physical sense, but about the distribution of wavelengths. Golden tones contain more red and yellow light, which your brain reads as comforting. This association is ancient firelight, candlelight, the last glow of sunset, all carried safety in the deep past of human history. These lights signaled rest, community, and the closing of the day. The chandeliers in this room replicate that ancestral calm. Their bulbs are tiny, yet they produce a color temperature around 2,700 Kelvin, similar to candlelight. The human nervous system responds to such warmth by releasing less cortisol, the hormone of alertness, and encouraging the production of melatonin, the hormone of sleep. Without you even noticing, your body is preparing for rest. You step closer to one of the chandeliers, noticing how each crystal droplet is cut. The angles are deliberate, chosen to refract light in just the right way. This is optics at an intimate scale. The same physics that shapes rainbows in the sky is at work here, only smaller, slower, and meant for a private audience. When light enters the crystal, it slows slightly, because light travels differently through glass than through air. This change in speed bends the light, splitting it into faint spectra. Even in the miniature scale, your eyes pick up these subtle shifts, and your mind interprets them as richness. The more variations of tone and brightness your eye receives, the more depth the light seems to have. Around you, the walls reflect. The chandeliers glow, softening shadows until they melt into each other. There are no harsh lines here, just gradients, the visual equivalent of a sigh. Interior designers call this diffuse lighting, where light is scattered in many directions instead of focused. Your mind reads it as gentleness. A miniature writing desk sits beneath one of the chandeliers, its surface gleaming in the glow. You imagine what it might be like to sit there, pen in hand, while the light pools softly across the paper. Studies in environmental psychology have shown that warm, low-intensity lighting increases creative focus. It invites the mind to linger, to explore without urgency. The floor beneath your feet, tiny patterned tiles, shimmers faintly where the light grazes them at an angle. This grazing light emphasizes texture, revealing the subtle rise and fall of each tile. Photographers use this same principle, angling light to bring out the details of the subject. Here, it turns every surface into something worth noticing. You tilt your head back toward the chandeliers and wonder about their energy source. In the real world, even miniature lights need power, whether by tiny electrical wiring or the hidden placement of LED bulbs. LEDs, though small, are marvels of physics. They emit light when electrons move through a semiconductor, a process far more efficient than heating a filament. And yet, here, they are disguised to look like the flicker of old-world candles. The science is modern, but the feeling is timeless. The rain outside continues, muted but steady. Occasionally, the light from inside catches on a droplet sliding down the museum window, and for a heartbeat, the droplet glows like a jewel. This is total internal reflection, when light bounces inside a transparent surface instead of passing through, making it gleam more brightly. Even a raindrop can become a lantern in the right conditions. As you stand there, you notice your own shadow stretching softly along the miniature wall. It is faint, not a hard silhouette, because the light comes from many directions. Shadows like this feel less intrusive, almost like they're blending with the space instead of cutting across it. There's a subtle truth here. The softer the light, the more you feel a part of the room rather than separate from it. Your mind drifts to the idea of memory. You recall moments from your own life when light was like this, moments that seemed to exist in a kind of golden suspension. Science tells us that lighting conditions can influence how vividly we store memories. Warm, dim light engages the limbic system, the part of the brain tied to emotion, making experiences feel more intimate and worth keeping. Perhaps that is why this room feels so much like a memory you've just stepped into, even though you've never been here before. You wander slowly to the far side of the room, where a smaller light source catches your attention. It's a tiny lamp, no taller than your hand, sitting on a bedside table. The lampshade is made of delicate fabric, patterned faintly with flowers. The light it casts is even warmer than the chandeliers, pooling like molten gold on the tables. Surface. This is localized lighting, a small, dedicated glow meant for a single quarter. Unlike the broad wash of a chandelier, this kind of light creates intimacy in miniature, making the space feel private, almost secret. It's easy to imagine someone, perhaps a tiny figure in this tiny world, reading by it long after everyone else has gone to sleep. You stand there, letting the layers of light settle around you, the broad halos from above, the focused glow from the lamp, the occasional sparkle from the crystals. The air feels still, as if the lights themselves are holding it in place. And then, beyond this room, you catch a glimpse of movement, a shimmer of light that seems different. It's cooler, more fluid, as though it's shaped not by glass or crystal, but by water. You take a final look at the chandelier's golden halos before following that cooler, shifting light, wondering how rain itself might become part of a song. The golden halos of the chandeliers fade behind you as you step toward the source of that cooler light. The room opens onto a broad window, and beyond it, the rain greets you again, no longer a faint patter, but a steady, deliberate presence. Pause, letting your body still until all you hear is the rain itself. At first, it seems like one continuous sound, a soft and endless hiss. But the longer you listen, the more you begin to notice its layers. There are the sharp taps of droplets, striking the glass directly before you. The softer, almost hollow thuds as they land on the wooden sill outside. The faint splashes as they meet the shallow puddles that have gathered along the ground. It is less like a single note and more like a collection of instruments, each with its own voice, blending into something larger than itself. The physics behind this music begins with the droplet. A raindrop is not perfectly round. Surface tension pulls it into a shape slightly flattened at the bottom. When it strikes a surface, The energy of its fall is transferred into vibrations, tiny movements that travel through the air as sound waves. These waves have different frequencies depending on the size of the drop and the surface it strikes. Small droplets create higher-pitched sounds. Larger ones make lower, rounder tones. This variety is why rain rarely sounds monotonous. It carries a built-in complexity, a constantly shifting pattern. You close your eyes to listen more deeply, and the sound begins to separate in your mind. You hear the rain that falls close by bright, distinct, immediate, and the rain that falls farther away, softened by distance and by the way sound scatters as it travels. In the language of acoustics, this is attenuation, the gradual fading of sound energy over space. Somewhere in the distance, you catch the hollow, rhythmic drip of water spilling from a roof into a metal gutter. Its repetition becomes an anchor in the shifting music, like the steady beat of a drum in an orchestra. Around it, the softer tones weave in and out, like strings playing in the background. There is science, too, in the way your mind responds to this layered sound. Research has shown that non-repetitive, gentle noises like rainfall engage the brain's auditory system without triggering alertness. Your mind recognizes the randomness as harmless, allowing your nervous system to relax. This is why rain is often used as a sleep aid and occupies just enough of your awareness to quiet intrusive thoughts, but not so much that it demands attention. The wind shifts, and with it, the pattern changes. Now the drops strike at an angle, creating a more staccato rhythm against the glass. You think of a conductor leading an unseen orchestra, altering the tempo with the slightest movement. In reality, the wind is altering the velocity and trajectory of the droplets, changing the surfaces they meet, and thus the sounds they create. You open your eyes again, watching how each droplet leaves a brief mark on the glass before joining the rivulets that race downward. These moving trails catch the faint light, bending it into tiny arcs. Light and sound, you realize, are more connected than they seem. Both travel as waves, both shaped by the surfaces they encounter, both capable of transforming a simple scene into something alive. Somewhere near your feet, you notice the low, continuous murmur of water flowing into a nearby drain. Its pitch is deeper, more resonant, because the sound resonates inside the hollow space below. This is resonance in action, the same principle that makes a musical instrument's body amplify its sound, even in something as humble as a street drain. Physics finds a way to create music. You step closer to the window until you can rest your palm lightly against the cool glass. The vibrations are faint, but present tiny tremors under your skin, created by the impact of thousands of droplets. It's a reminder that sound is not only something you hear, it is also something you feel. Low-frequency sounds, in particular, can travel through the body, creating a physical sense of calm by influencing breathing and heart rate. As you listen, you find patterns within the randomness. A steady tap-tap-tap from one corner of the roof. The occasional heavier drop, like a low drumbeat. Even silence makes its appearance. Brief pauses when the wind shifts, and the window seems to hold its breath before the next wave of rain arrives. Nature's music has no fixed score. It is composed in real time, shaped by the weather, the surfaces, and the listener. If you were to step outside, the sound would change again, sharper on the skin, louder in the open air, perhaps mixed with the rustle of wet leaves. You think about how humans have always drawn inspiration from these natural sounds. Composers have written symphonies to mimic the shifting rhythms of storms. Poets have likened rain to whispered conversations or fingers tracing on a drum. And in a way, it is both a language and a percussion, speaking in pulses and pauses. There is also a deeper connection at play. The sound of rain resembles the sounds heard in the womb. The constant whoosh of blood, the rhythmic thud of a heartbeat. the muffled vibrations of the outside world all form a protective sonic cocoon for a developing mind. Perhaps that is why rain feels so instinctively safe. It returns us to the comfort of those earliest rhythms. The glass in front of you is streaked with hundreds of trails now, each one a path taken by water in search of the ground. You imagine the journey each droplet has made from vapor rising in the air, to cloud, to falling drop, to this final descent down a pane of glass. And in its final moments, before joining the earth again, it has offered you music. The tempo shifts once more. A brief gust rattles the branches outside, sending a burst of heavier drops against the glass in quick succession. Then, as the wind calms, the sound settles back into its slow, even pulse. It is like breathing inhale, exhale, tension, release. Your own breathing syncs with it without effort. You inhale during the louder bursts, exhale as the sound softens. This synchronization is a natural response. Studies show that certain rhythms can guide physiological processes, gently nudging the body toward rest. You step back slightly, allowing your gaze to widen beyond the window. The rain blurs the world into soft shapes, trees bending under its touch, puddles rippling under each new arrival. Every movement adds to the symphony, each element and instrument in its own register. Somewhere in the miniature world of the fairy castle, you imagine how the rain would sound if it could truly fall here, how each roof tile, each tiny stone path would contribute its own note to the composition. In reality, the castle is safe from the storm, but your mind lets the two worlds merge for just a moment. The rain begins to ease, its voice softening, not ending, just lowering, as though the music is moving into a quieter movement of the symphony. And in that softening, another sound begins to emerge from the edges, a stillness that holds its own kind of music. In the gentle quiet between the drops, you sense something waiting beyond the window green, intricate and alive, as if the rain has been preparing you to step into a smaller, hidden garden. The rain's rhythm still lingers in your ears as you turn from the window. In the corner of the miniature world, you notice an archway no taller than your palm. Its frame is carved with delicate vines, and beyond it, a faint glimmer hints at something alive. You lean closer, and the space opens into a garden small enough to rest on a tabletop. It's so intricate, it feels endless. Stone paths wind between patches of green, their patterns inviting your eyes to follow. Droplets from the earlier rain seem to have found their way here, clinging to tiny leaves like crystal orbs. The air, even imagined, feels cooler and fresher. In this little sanctuary dot, at first glance, it looks like decoration and ornamental corner to delight the viewer. But gardens, even the smallest ones, are living systems. Every element here plays a role in keeping the whole in balance. This is the essence of a micro-ecosystem, a self-contained world where plants, soil, water, and light interact in miniature harmony. Your gaze settles on a cluster of moss growing between the stones. Moss is a master of small spaces. Without roots, it absorbs water directly through its leaves, making it perfectly suited for environments where soil is shallow or absent. Each tiny green strand is a pioneer species, able to colonize bare surfaces and prepare them for other life. A miniature fern spreads its delicate fronds. In full scale, ferns can grow to fill entire forest floors, but here, their reduced size makes them seem all the more intricate. The science of plant scaling follows the same biological rules at every size. Fronds unfurl to maximize surface area for photosynthesis, catching as much light as possible. You notice how the stones are placed, not simply as decoration, but to shape the garden's conditions. Some create shade, protecting delicate plants from too much sun. Others act as natural reservoirs, collecting moisture that will slowly release into the soil. This design mirrors larger landscapes, where rocks and terrain determine how water and sunlight are distributed. In miniature gardens, these principles are magnified. A shift in light by just a few centimeters can change which plants thrive. A single stone can alter the flow of water. Here, microclimates exist within arm's reach, small patches that mimic the variety of an entire meadow or woodland. One path leads to a tiny pool no wider than your hand. On its surface, a droplet of water trembles, catching the faint light above. Even the smallest body of water plays a role in sustaining life. It reflects light into shaded corners, raises local humidity, and offers a resting place for minute creatures. In a living garden, even in miniature, such a pool might host tiny insects or microscopic algae. Your mind drifts to the concept of scale in ecology, how processes repeat themselves at different magnitudes. Whether in a rainforest or a tabletop garden, the balance of energy, water, and nutrients follows the same patterns. Plants capture light, transform it into energy, and pass it along the chain of life. Water cycles between soil, air, and living things. Decomposers, fungi. Bacteria return nutrients to the ground for the next generation. You imagine the unseen life in this garden. Soil, even in a spoonful, can hold billions of microorganisms. These microscopic inhabitants form networks of exchange. Trading nutrients with plant roots in relationships, scientists call symbiosis. In return for sugars from the plants, fungi and bacteria provide minerals the plants cannot reach on their own. You tilt your head to catch the play of light on a patch of tiny flowers near the archway. Their petals, each no bigger than a fingernail, are arranged with the same symmetry found in their larger relatives. This symmetry is not just aesthetic, it is functional. Petal patterns guide pollinators toward the center, where pollen and nectar wait. In a real-world miniature garden, such flowers might draw tiny bees, hoverflies, or even ants acting as accidental pollinators. Rain too shapes life here. You picture how a droplet falling from above would land with far more force relative to the plant's size than it would in a full-scale garden. Yet these plants are adapted to handle it, their leaves angled to shed excess water, their stems flexible enough to bend without breaking. This resilience is part of why miniature gardens, when cared for, can thrive for years. Your attention lingers on the paths, carefully laid stones that wind without haste. In full-scale landscapes, winding paths slow a traveler's pace, encouraging observation. Here, the effect is the same, even for the eye. By following the curves, you take in the garden more fully, noticing details you might miss in a single glance. There is a quiet artistry in arranging such a space. The creator must think like both a gardener and an ecologist, understanding not only the visual balance, but also the living needs of each species. This is horticultural design at its most delicate, where every placement has purpose. You breathe in deeply, imagining the scent of damp earth and green leaves after rain. There is science in that scent, geosmin, a compound produced by soil bacteria, released when water disturbs the ground. Humans are remarkably sensitive to it. We can detect it at concentrations as low as a few parts per trillion. Perhaps this is why the smell of rain on soil feels so grounding. It is a connection to life's microscopic foundations. A light breeze, real or imagined, seems to stir the leaves, carrying with it the faintest sound of water trickling over stone. In the quiet, you realize how much this small space mirrors the vast patterns of nature. It is a reminder that the principles sustaining life do not depend on size. The same balance that holds a forest together can exist in a garden you could carry in your hands. You follow the path to the far side, where the miniature garden seems to meet the edge of the castle wall. There, in the shadow of a carved balcony, a patch of ivy clings to the stone, its tiny leaves reaching upward. Climbing. Plants use a principle called phototropism, growing toward light sources to find their way even in confined spaces. The ivy's tendrils are so fine they could almost be threads, yet they anchor with quiet determination. You pause, letting the scene settle into memory. The rain outside has softened to a faint whisper, but here, inside the miniature world, it feels as if time has slowed further. You think about how much life exists in spaces we often overlook, how even the smallest patch of green can hold entire worlds in your mind. You step back through the archway, carrying with you the calm of the garden. But as you do, something catches your attention: a narrow staircase just beyond, spiraling upward toward a room you haven't yet seen. From its doorway, the faint outline of bookshelves is visible, and a soft golden light spills into the hall. You take one last look at the garden's quiet balance before your gaze lifts toward that inviting light, wondering what stories a library this small and this magical might hold. You leave the garden's archway behind, your steps slow and unhurried, drawn toward the faint glow spilling from above. The spiral staircase winds gently upward, its carved railing smooth beneath your fingertips. With each turn, the air feels warmer, carrying with it a scent you recognize instantly: aged paper, polished wood, and something faintly sweet. Like the whisper of old ink at the top, you step into a small room, no larger than a wardrobe, yet it feels boundless. Shelves rise from floor to ceiling, each one holding books so tiny you could cradle them in your palm. Some are bound in deep red leather, others in faded cloth worn smooth with imagined use. Their spines are stamped with titles and script so fine you'd need a magnifying glass to read them. You approach the nearest shelf and let your fingers hover over the miniature volumes. The textures are real, each book crafted with the same care as its life-sized counterpart. In their presence, you feel an instinctive, quiet, and unspoken invitation to slow down, to listen with more than your ears. Libraries, even in miniature, carry a particular gravity. They are vessels of memory, both personal and collective. Each book is a container of thought, a way of holding a moment in time so it can be revisited. The science of memory calls this external storage, the ability to place ideas outside the brain so they can be shared, preserved, and expanded upon. You imagine opening one of these books, the pages no bigger than postage stamps, each one holding words that might carry you into another life. Reading is a kind of time travel. When you immerse yourself in a story, your brain activates many of the same neural pathways it would if you were actually experiencing those events. This is the magic of mental simulation, a process where imagination becomes rehearsal and fiction feels real. You picture, for a moment, a scene from one of these books, perhaps a windswept shore, perhaps a forest at dawn. As you visualize it, your sensory cortex engages, your brain lights up as if you are truly hearing the waves or smelling the pine. The library becomes a portal, each book a doorway to a different sensory landscape. There is also a deep connection between stories and the way your brain organizes memory. The hippocampus, a seahorse-shaped structure deep in the brain, acts like the librarian of your mind. It doesn't just store memories. It weaves them together into coherent narratives. That's why stories, whether read or lived, are easier to remember than isolated facts. They give your mind a structure to hold on to. You glance toward the far corner of the room, where a small ladder leans against the shelves. In a full-sized library, such a ladder might stretch to reach the highest volumes, but here it is barely taller than your knee. Even so, it suggests scale, as if somewhere beyond your sight line, the library extends into hidden wings. The lighting here is softer than in the other rooms. No chandeliers, just the glow of two tiny lamps placed on either side of a central reading table. Their golden pools of light seem to warm the wood, drawing your attention to the single open book lying there. You step closer, Its pages are filled not with words, but with delicate illustrations, scenes of mountains, rivers, and skies. Each image is painted in fine detail, yet small enough to fit entirely on your fingertip. Visual storytelling, you remember, predates the written word. For thousands of years, humans passed knowledge through images alone, a practice still etched into the way our brains process information. The visual cortex can interpret images in milliseconds, far faster than reading text. That you wonder about the people who might have once read in this miniature library, whether they were figures imagined by the castle's creator or symbolic stand-ins for all who find solace in stories. Reading, after all, is a form of shared intimacy. Across centuries and distances, you meet the mind of someone you have never seen. Speaking in words they may have written long before you were born. You lift your gaze from the table to the shelves again. It occurs to you that the very presence of a library here, in this tiny castle, mirrors the way the human mind works. Most of your thoughts in any given moment are not new. They are drawn from the stored archives of experience, reshaped and reinterpreted. Just as a library holds both ancient texts and recent volumes, your brain carries both long-held memories and fresh impressions. In a miniature space, this truth feels magnified. You see clearly how much can be contained in a small volume. How many worlds can be folded into a single palm-sized book. It is the same with memory. Whole chapters of your life exist in moments no longer than a breath. Your eyes drift to a shelf near the floor, where the books are arranged not by color or size, but by what seems to be theme. Tiny botanical sketches on the covers suggest these are volumes on plants and gardens. Perhaps they hold the knowledge needed to tend the miniature garden downstairs, the balance of water, light, and soil translated into words. This, too, mirrors life. Libraries are not only repositories of imagination, but also of practical wisdom. The rain outside continues its quiet percussion, a steady backdrop to the stillness here. You imagine sitting at the reading table, opening one of these books and letting the minutes fall away. In reality, your brain under such conditions would likely enter a state called flow, a deep, immersive focus where time feels suspended. In flow, the prefrontal cortex temporarily relaxes its control, allowing thought to move more freely, unbound by the clock. You take a step back toward the doorway, letting your eyes sweep over the room one last time. There is something about a library, even in miniature, that feels alive, not in the sense of movement, but in the quiet pulse of stored thought, of voices waiting to be heard. Before you leave, your gaze catches on a narrow window tucked between two shelves. The glass is clear, and through it you can see the world outside, softened by rain. Beyond the window, a reflection glimmers your own face, framed by the spines of tiny books. For a moment, you feel like a character in one of them. Then, just at the edge of your vision, you notice what lies below that window, a view into another space entirely. It seems larger, more open, its floor glistening faintly, as if reflecting the rain in some quiet dance. You take one last slow breath in the library's golden glow before turning toward that open space, wondering how rain and reflection might shape your sense of time. You leave the warmth of the miniature library, stepping toward the narrow window you noticed earlier. It frames the outside world like a painting, but today the brushstrokes belong to the rain. Droplets cling to the glass in perfect beads before, spilling into rivulets, distorting the view beyond into a shifting watercolor of muted greens, grays, and golds. You stand still, watching the way the rain moves across the pane. Each droplet reflects the light in its own small way, carrying a miniature image of the world inside its curved surface. If you could look closely enough, you might see yourself there, tiny, inverted, and refracted through a sphere of water. It is a quiet reminder that water is both mirror and traveler. The droplet on the glass was once part of something vast, a river, a lake, perhaps even an ocean. Before that, it may have fallen as snow on a mountaintop, or drifted unseen as vapor through a summer sky. And after it leaves this window, it will continue onward, seeping into soil, joining a stream, or rising again into the air. This is the water cycle, the Earth's great circulatory system. It begins not in any single place, but in motion itself. The sun warms the surface of oceans and lakes, giving water molecules the energy to break free from their liquid bonds and rise into the air as vapor. This is evaporation, a silent migration. Upward dot in the cooler heights of the atmosphere, the vapor slows and condenses, clinging to microscopic particles of dust or salt. Tiny droplets form, gathering into clouds. Each one is so small it can drift for days, carried by winds across continents. And then, when they join into larger droplets too heavy to remain suspended, gravity calls them home. They fall sometimes, as gentle rain like today, sometimes as snow, hail, or mist dot. You watch the droplets slide down the glass, merging into small streams before disappearing out of sight. There is something mesmerizing in their repetition. They fall, they merge, they vanish, only to return again in another form. The cycle is endless, yet never quite the same twice dot in this way. Rain has a rhythm that echoes your own life. Moments arrive, pass, and return in altered form. The repetition can be comforting proof that endings are rarely absolute, that most things come back to us in some way, changed but familiar. The blurred landscape beyond the glass seems to breathe with this idea. Trees sway gently under the weight of the water, their leaves catching droplets that will soon drip to the earth. Each drop that lands at a tree's base may sink into the ground, drawn by gravity through soil and stone, joining underground aquifers. Some of that water might remain there for decades, centuries, even millennia before emerging again at a spring or well. You imagine this hidden journey. The water moves in darkness, slipping through narrow spaces between grains of rock cooled by the earth around it. Eventually, it finds its way back into the open feeding a river, moistening the air or rising once again to the sky. Time moves differently underground, just as it does in the quieter seasons of a human life. The science of this movement is precise. Hydrologists measure the speed of flow, the porosity of soil, the rates of evaporation. But to you, it feels like a slow conversation between earth and sky. Each exchange is part of a dialogue that has been going on since long before there were people to hear it. You place your fingertips lightly on the cool window pane. The glass separates you from the rain, yet you feel part of it. Your breath fogs the surface briefly, and in that moment the outside world becomes even softer, as if the line between you and it has blurred. Time itself feels different when you watch rain. It doesn't march forward in straight lines. It drifts and pulls. It loops back on itself. Scientists sometimes describe the water cycle as a closed system. No water is ever truly lost from Earth, only transformed. In this way, every drop you see today has been here before, perhaps many times over. The water that now trickles down. This glass could once have been part of an ancient sea, or a glacier long vanished. You think of how memory works in a similar way. Experiences don't disappear. They shift form. Some rise to the surface easily, bright and vivid. Others sink deep, stored in places you rarely visit, until something, perhaps a sound, a scent, or a scene like this, draws them back into the light. The brain's own cycles of recall and forgetting are like weather, unpredictable, yet patterned dot beyond the window. The puddles in the courtyard mirror the sky. The surface trembles with each raindrop, breaking and reforming reflections. In an instant. Reflection, in the physical sense, is simply light bouncing off a surface. But in the mind, reflection is a slower process, turning thoughts over, examining them from different angles, finding meaning in their shapes. You wonder if that is why rain inspires such introspection. It slows the outer world just enough for the inner one to come into focus. The brain's default mode network, the system active when we are not focused on external tasks, comes alive in these quiet moments. It's the part of the mind where daydreams, self-reflection, and long arc thinking take place. Somewhere in the stillness, you realize that the rain outside and the thoughts inside are not separate at all. Both are cycles. Both are currents moving. Two larger systems. One shapes landscapes. The other shapes understanding. A heavier drop hits the glass, pulling you back into the physical moment. You follow its path downward until it joins a thin line of water at the bottom of the window. The joined streams remind you of rivers meeting, of time converging many small moments flowing into something larger got, and yet, in the same instant, you are aware of the fragility of each droplet's form. Soon, the sun will return, and the water will lift into the air again, invisible until it gathers once more. Change is inevitable, but disappearance is an illusion. The substance remains. Only the shape changes. You step back slightly to take in the whole view. The rain's blurring of the world feels almost protective, like a curtain drawn between you and the rush of everyday life. In this softened light, even the passage of time feels gentler. Seconds stretch, minutes flow into each other. The moment feels as though it could go on forever, even though you know it will not. Somewhere behind you, deeper inside the castle, a faint rhythmic sound begins to emerge. It's not rain, its tone is steadier, more deliberate. You turn your head slightly, catching the glow of a nearby doorway. Beyond it, you sense the quiet pulse of work being done with hands, tools, and patience craft, shaping something that will last. You take one last look at the rain-washed world before stepping away from the window, curious to follow that steady rhythm and see what patient creation might be unfolding in the room beyond. You follow the sound, soft, steady, and deliberate, till you arrive at a small room tucked deep within the castle. There is no grandeur here, no sweeping staircase or gilded chandelier. Instead, the space feels almost like a workshop, a place where beauty begins before it is displayed. A narrow work table stands at the center, its surface scattered with miniature tools. There are brushes so fine, their bristles are barely visible, spools of thread no thicker than a strand of hair, and carving instruments sharp enough to shape the smallest details. Pieces of half-finished furniture rest in neat rows, tiny chairs awaiting cushions, unpainted shutters waiting for their coat of color. The air is warm, touched by the faint scent of wood shavings and fabric dye. You can almost see the hands that once worked here, shaping each element of the fairy castle with patience so deep it feels like a form of devotion. Craftsmanship, especially at this scale, demands more than skill, demands control. Every cut, stitch, and brushstroke relies on fine motor skills, the precise coordination of muscles in your fingers, hands, and wrists. These movements are guided by the brain's motor cortex, a region that maps each muscle and sends signals with astonishing speed and accuracy. In miniature work, the margin for error is microscopic. A thread pulled too tightly can warp fabric. A carving stroke too heavy can split wood beyond repair. The body responds by slowing itself, reducing unnecessary movement, the way a musician might quiet a room before striking the first note. This slowness does more than ensure accuracy. It creates space for the mind to settle. Neuroscientists have found that repetitive, precise hand movements can lower heart rate and reduce activity in the brain's stress centers. In essence, craftsmanship becomes a form of meditation in motion. The maker's focus narrows to the task at hand, and time begins to dissolve. You imagine the process of making one of the castle's miniature curtains. First, the fabric must be chosen not just for color, but for the way it drapes at this scale. Fibers that seem soft and flowing in full size may appear stiff when reduced. A fabric is cut, edges hemmed with stitches so small they disappear. Into the weave. Pleats are pressed, the folds measured so they fall evenly. Finally, the curtain is hung, its lines softened until it looks as though a gentle breeze could pass through at any moment. Every stage of this work engages not only the muscles, but also the brain's parietal lobe, where spatial awareness lives. The maker must constantly adjust for proportion, imagining how each element will look in the context of the whole. It's a mental dance between what is seen and what is imagined, between the fingertip and the mind's eye. You notice a small wooden sculpture resting on the edge of the work table, a chair so detailed that even its legs bear tiny carved flourishes. The wood grain is barely perceptible, yet it has been shaped to match the curvature of a real life-size chair. This kind of detail is more than decorative. It taps into the human love for verisimilitude, the pleasure of seeing reality replicated, faithfully in miniature. Your brain, designed to recognize patterns and forms, finds satisfaction in the accuracy, as though the object is a secret perfectly told. There is a rhythm here, though it is not measured in beats or seconds. It is measured in acts of making, the turn of a tool, the pause to adjust light, the steady breath before the next cut. You can feel it even as an observer. Your breathing matches the imagined pace of the work, your mind slowing to follow each invisible step. The artistry in this room also tells you something about the nature of mastery. Studies of expert craftsmen reveal that thousands of hours of practice change not only muscle memory, but also the structure of the brain itself. Neural pathways become more efficient. Connections between motor control and sensory feedback grow stronger. The hand becomes an extension of thought, and tools become part of the body's language. You think about how this process mirrors the making of the castle itself. Each element, stone, glass, garden, light, was shaped by human hands and human patience. No part exists without intention. The work may be unseen by those who visit briefly, but it is here, in the quiet of the workshop, that the castle's soul was built. You let your gaze drift to a small shelf above the table, where jars of pigment sit in a neat row. Each color holds the potential to change a scene's mood entirely. A warm ochre can make a room feel inviting. A cool blue can make it feel distant. Color theory is both science and art, the way wavelengths of light interact with the eyes. Cones and the way the mind attaches emotion to them. Beside the pigments rests a magnifying glass mounted on a small stand. You imagine the maker bending over it, pulling the world closer until each fiber, each grain, each brushstroke is magnified. This act of focusing so closely is more than a technical need. It is a kind of surrender, allowing oneself to become absorbed in a world so small it excludes everything else. The room is still, but it holds echoes. You can almost hear the scrape of a carving tool, the soft snip of thread, the gentle tap of a brush on wood. Each sound would have been quiet enough to lose in the larger world, but here they formed their own intimate score, the heartbeat of Viv. Craftsmanship. You begin to realize that to create something like this castle is to believe in the value of care. For its own sake, there is no urgency here, no race to finish. The reward lies in the act itself, in the quiet pleasure of shaping something that will last. Your eyes catch on a small, unfinished piece at the edge of the table, a tiny door. Its hinges waiting to be fixed. Even incomplete, it has beauty. Perhaps that is another truth of craftsmanship, that the process is as meaningful as the product, and that there is dignity in the work no one else will ever see. The rain outside continues its softened rhythm, a counterpoint to the imagined motions in this room. In some ways, both are steady, patient forces, one shaped by nature, the other by human will. Both leave behind a changed landscape, whether in stone, soil, or the delicate architecture of the miniature world dot. As you step back from the work table, you notice a narrow corridor leading away from the workshop. At the end, a door stands slightly ajar, and from within spills the dimmest of light, not golden, but silvery, as though moonlight itself has found a way inside. You pause at the threshold, the quiet rhythm of craft still in your mind, and feel a pull toward that silvery glow, wondering how the castle might look when it finally rests under the rain's darkened night. You step through the narrow corridor, leaving behind the warmth of the workshop's golden light. The silvery glow ahead widens into a quiet hall where the miniature castle sits in its entirety, enclosed in the stillness of night. Outside, the rain has softened into a gentle mist, its sound no longer insistent but tender, like a voice lowered to a whisper. The castle's spires rise in delicate silhouettes against the dim glow, their edges softened by the way the light blends with the darkness. Windows that once shone with gold now glimmer faintly, as if they too have begun to rest. It feels as though the whole structure has exhaled, settling into a stillness you can almost feel. You move closer until you can rest your hand on the cool glass that protects the display. Beyond it, the castle seems both solid and dreamlike, walls unmoving, yet alive with the quiet memory of the day's light and motion. There is a peaceful symmetry in this moment. You watching the castle resting under the rain folding the night into its soft embrace. Night is a time of restoration, not just for people, but for many living things. In humans, the shift into rest is guided by the body's circadian rhythm, a 24-hour cycle regulated by light, temperature, and internal clocks in the brain. As evening deepens, the pineal gland releases melatonin, signaling the body to slow its pace. Heart rate eases, muscles loosen, and brain activity begins to change, preparing for the journey into sleep. You feel this process in yourself now. Your breathing has slowed, matched to the steady rhythm of the rain outside. The museum is quiet, and your mind, like the castle, is ready to let go of the day's activity. Inside the castle, the miniature rooms are bathed in soft shadow. You imagine them as they might be if they could truly live, tiny curtains drawn against the night, the echo of footsteps fading from the hallways, fireplaces reduced to gentle embers. Even in this imagined stillness, there is a sense of continuity. The rooms will wake again, just as you will. Science tells us that during sleep, the brain does not shut down. Instead, it enters a state of intricate activity, cycling through stages that serve different purposes. In non-REM sleep, especially its deepest stage, the body repairs itself, tissues regenerate, energy stores are replenished, and the immune system strengthens. In REM sleep, the brain becomes active in a different way, weaving dreams and consolidating memories. Much like a librarian quietly placing the day's events onto their shelves, it's comforting to think that, as you sleep, your mind will be storing away the sights and feelings of the rain against the windows, the glow of tiny lights, the quiet heartbeat of craftsmanship. These memories will join the archive of experiences you carry forward, ready to surface again when something someday calls them back. Outside, the rain's pattern has shifted again. Now it falls in a fine, even mist, the droplets so small that they seem to blur together into one continuous sound. This kind of gentle, consistent noise is what scientists call pink noise, a balanced distribution of frequencies that the human brain finds especially soothing. Studies have shown that pink noise can help stabilize sleep patterns, guiding the brain into deeper, more restful stages. You close your eyes for a moment and simply listen. The sound feels like a blanket, covering not just you, but the entire scene, the castle, the room, the streets beyond. It is a reminder that rest is not an isolated act. It is part of a larger rhythm shared by everything that slows under the Night dot, when you open your eyes again, you notice how the rain has left the glass of the display speckled with tiny droplets, each catching a bit of the dim light. They look like stars scattered across the castle's surface, as if the night sky itself is bent down to rest here. You think about how sleep is sometimes compared to nightfall, a pause, a descent into shadow. But in truth, it is more like a tide, moving in and out, bringing renewal with each cycle. The glymphatic system in the brain, for example, becomes more active during sleep, flushing out metabolic waste and refreshing the neural pathways for the day ahead. This quiet maintenance is as essential as the castle's upkeep, the careful dusting and repairs that keep its beauty intact. Your gaze drifts upward to the spires again. In the stillness, they seem almost like watchful guardians, keeping their place until morning. The rain continues, steady and patient, marking time without urgency. Somewhere deep in your body, you feel the pull of sleep more strongly now. It is not the heaviness of exhaustion, but the gentle weight of surrender, the way a leaf might float down to rest on the surface of a pond. Sleep invites you not to escape the world, but to drift deeper into it, to meet it in another form. You imagine lying down somewhere nearby, the rain's murmur just beyond the window, the image of the castle glowing faintly in your mind's eye. In dreams, it might come alive again, doors opening, lights brightening, footsteps returning to the halls. Dreams often blend the real and the imagined, weaving them together in ways that feel natural while they last. As you prepare to turn away, you take in the castle one last time. There is no sense of finality here, only the feeling of a chapter closing. The rain has been your companion from the first moment you arrived, and now it will follow you into the night, its rhythm a quiet bridge between waking and sleep. You step back from the glass, the sound of your own breathing mingling with the rain. The castle remains where it is, still and luminous, as though it has settled into its own deep slumber. You realize that you are leaving it as you found it, safely held in its place, waiting for another day, another visitor, another quiet evening under the rain. The thought is strangely comforting, that the world can rest, and you can rest with it. The lights in the room seem dimmer now, though perhaps it is only your eyes adjusting to the pull of night. You take one more slow breath, letting it fill you before releasing it, your shoulders easing as you exhale. Outside, the rain will keep falling, each drop a note in the lullaby that carries you forward. And somewhere in the spaces between those notes, sleep will arrive, not suddenly, but gently, like a door opening onto a softer world. And as you turn toward that door, you carry the image of the castle with you, quiet, steadfast, and bathed in the silver light of rain. Knowing it will follow you into whatever dreams are waiting. And now, as our story gently fades, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for spending this moment with me. Your presence here means the world, and your support helps me create even more peaceful journeys just for you. If this helped you rest, please consider liking, subscribing, or simply coming back tomorrow night. Until then, stay cozy, stay kind, and may your dreams tonight be soft, serene, and full of wonder. Good night, my friend. With warmth, David.